With the release of the Elephant patch notes a couple of days ago, multiple things were changed throughout Stormgate. First, we were off of the Devastator build that had been, by all accounts, available and played with some serious public matches demonstrated from either about December 15th to around about January 20th. Things such as the DreamHack Atlanta show match or the Artosis Super Cup or some of the show matches that we've seen on channels and some of the streamers that we have seen throughout the last couple of weeks as we head into Steam Next Fest were on this Devastator patch. A couple of other things were also changed. Balance changes, mostly buffs for Vanguard and nerfs for Infernals. For the cooperative versus AI players, there was a whole new hero added with multiple new units and a couple of quality of life changes as well. One of those changes being the top bar. Another one, however, more pertinent to this video, was the name and typing of the different league distributions for the competitive 1v1 ladder. Now, this is all in the backdrop of we're going to have Steam Next Fest in a couple of days on February 5th to 12th. And that means that there's going to be hundreds, maybe thousands, maybe well above that, numbers of people who have wishlisted the game on Steam and think that Stormgate with Frost Giant Studios is going to be the future of RTS games. They're going to want to be able to play during that time frame. While Kickstarter backers have gotten in earlier and strong players have done so as well, and a couple that have won the lottery also managed to get in through some previous beta wave invites. What makes Steam Next Fest unique is that from February 5th to 12th, there's going to be a lifting of the NDA. Content can be made freely. The game will be free for all people to join in and play as they see fit for the period of that week. We have a 10K tournament from the 10th and 11th that's going on through Elite Gaming Channel. We also have a weekly event that is going to be happening run by Attico, which will be the Alpha Navigators Cup. And all of this is the backdrop as we talk about the most unfortunate thing that I think should be changed in the patch. And that is, as I said, the naming and the types of the various leagues inside of Stormgate. Now, if you don't know what I mean, they follow a structure that's very similar to what has been used in League of Legends and Blizzard titles throughout and across other games. Let's go from the top level on down. So you have Masters, Diamond, Platinum, Gold, Silver, Bronze, and then at the very bottom level we have Aspirant. And it is at this bottom level that I have the most strong feelings that we should change. So there are two big reasons for this, and I'll get into both of them. The first reason is going to be just the way that language works. Gamers are people who are playing games that are usually, if they're lifestyle games like RTS games, they're usually quite niche. They generate their own kind of internal language structure. They generate ways that people shorten the game so that they can speak about them rapidly. They can share information in a useful manner and save the time that they have. In team games, this is especially important because you're communicating information quickly. The more words that you take, the longer it takes for me to understand your idea, the slower that will be, and possibly the worse will perform in game. This goes from things such as in Counter-Strike on Dust 2. Everyone knows about Goose or Car, right? But it goes further down than that. Right? When we talk about builds, sometimes you see a build order written as FE or Fast Expand in an RTS. Or when we say that someone has a Marine, Medevac, Marauder army, sometimes we just say they have a 3M army. Or if they also have Widow Mines, that's a 4M push because it details the information, distills it down in a way that gets the point across quickly, right? When we're talking about casting, yes, for the first couple of casts of a new game, or if the broadcast is oriented towards a newer or less endemic audience, the terms are expounded upon, made a little simpler. But the full depth of these terms are really seen in the games that people play. What is shuffle inside of Super Smash Bros. Melee? Well, it is a short hop fast fall with L cancel. Now, what's faster? Me telling you shuffle and very good Melee players understanding that that's the name of the technique we're discussing, or me explaining the short hop fast fall landing L cancel, right? So in the same way, the Aspirant rank has a really big problem with this. And I thought that Blizzard, well, this is not Blizzard, but I would have thought that people who were around the difficulties that Blizzard had with Blizzard All-Stars before it was renamed into Heroes of the Storm would be thinking about this, shall we say. So for those who don't know, Heroes of the Storm was initially called Blizzard All-Stars. And this gaming parlance, this idea of shortening things down so we can communicate quickly, is not just for in-game items, it's also for the games themselves. Most people don't say StarCraft 2, they say SE2, right? Team Fortress 2, same thing. We don't call it Defense of the Ancients, right? We call it Dota. Same idea. Now imagine that Blizzard All-Stars, I'll give you a second to think about what it shortens to. Balls, right? That's what the community shortened it to, and so it had its name changed to Heroes of the Storm. Now I want to note that the same thing happens here for Aspirant, right? Because it is a multisyllabic word and it is not in the metal framework and it is new, it excites people's curiosity to think about how they can shorten it. One way to shorten it is very simply to call that rank Ass. Now, this is particularly apt because it is the bottommost rank in the competitive ladder. Now, other titles, such as the levels in Dungeons and Dragons, or maybe if you're playing Path of Exile, you'll see a different name. Usually, the term aspirant is for somebody who is not a beginner, but is approaching journeyman status. They're 20% on their way through a journey, right? If we look at the Hearthstone ranks from 1 to 20 before you get to the extreme and elite level players, we would consider an aspirant not level 20 or not rank 20. That would be a person who is fairly new at the game, just starting out on their challenges. We would consider an aspirant somebody who's 15 or 16, to give an idea, about 20 to 25% of the way there on a path forward. So usually aspirant doesn't refer to the bottommost rank, and in this game it does. And because it refers to the bottommost rank, the comparison or the shortening of it to ass makes it funnier, more apt, and something that will be used as a term of derision and ridicule and as an insult for players coming in. Now, why do we care about that? Well, Frost Giant Studios has really marketed Stormgate as being a more approachable RTS. They have deliberately slowed down the time to kill. They have deliberately made pathing structure changes such that DPS density is not as high as it could be. Area units don't clump the same way that they used to. And they seem to have been very, very light-handed with the touches from what we can see publicly on things like the Atlas, on things even like the Flame On Imps, which, while I'm sure will experience their full destructive power under the Steam Next Fest open, full doors blown open, NDA-free zone of the beta, I'm sure also that these don't quite compare to the things you would compare them to, right? The Atlas is not a siege tank. Flame On Imps are not as powerful as Banelings, right? Workers are much stronger inside of the game. And so you're trying to encourage this lower time to kill gameplay, then it gets more people in. What's the other way that Frost Giant Studios is doing this? By emphasizing co-op versus AI. If you've never written a public statement before for patch notes or for anything that gets seen by the public, you put what you want the public to understand first at the top. And so when everyone was reading the elephant patch notes, I'm sure they said, if they're a competitively minded player, yeah, there's some co-op versus AI stuff. Who gives a shit about that? I'm moving on. It was deliberately put at the top because Frost Giant Studios has emphasized this idea that you get people into the game by having other people play with you, right? Something that was missed in the washed full spree of Warcraft 3 and StarCraft Brood War and StarCraft 2 streamers and professional players and content creators and analyzers, and analysts. Something that was missed in all of that, I think, was that, yes, all of those players were shown streaming Stormgate, but a few weeks prior there were League of Legends professionals who were also shown streaming Stormgate, such as the Odd One. Now, all of those people that were streaming and watching that stream and watching the Odd One and enjoying the process of the Stormgate experience when they don't come from an RTS background, let's imagine that they go into co-op versus AI. When they play co-op versus AI, hopefully they're going to have a good time, play with their friends, and then they might decide to go into the ranked structure. When they get into the ranked structure, if you're not new to RTS games, if you have some passing smattering of familiarity, you will be in upper bronze to silver. Maybe not in this beta because of the density of skill, but in a typical distribution, you would have some skill, right? People who don't come from an RTS background aren't familiar with a lot of the mechanical aspects that the game requires. They're not familiar with the meta aspects that what encourages, such as build orders, such as the understanding of timings to expand. These things don't exist in the same way in a MOBA. right? And so also compare Stormgate to its competition, right? It's not as fast seemingly as StarCraft 2. The micro isn't as long and as intensive as Warcraft 3. There's not as much of a screen to look at as Company of Heroes, right? You don't have to know as many factions or as deep as a tech tree as you do for Age of Empires 2. So in this experience, what is a person who comes in from co-op versus AI going to the easier, well marketed as being simpler, maybe more approachable RTS find? They get in, they get their head smacked down, maybe they have a good game or two along the way, here's hoping, and they get placed in Aspirant. Ass. That's their new experience. You have just undone a lot of the goodwill you've generated by marketing as being a friendlier game and just told them they're an ass league. Or, and I would never use this personally, but in the pejorative sense, Aspie, as in Asperger's, as in the idea that you struggle to communicate with people, you don't have a solid relationship with the game or with the other people in this community, right? You have a medical condition that makes you incapable of advancing in the same way of our normal society, says the person who would use this as a pejorative sense, not me, but in the normal society of RTS, right? Is that the first time experience you want those people to have? Now, any time that you put a bottom rank, there will be derision associated with somebody being in the bottom rank. And depending on how hardcore of a person you are, yeah, you probably should get made fun of. Like when I was Silver 1. When I was Silver 1 in CSGO, guess what? I was shit, okay? And I knew that and I accepted that. But here's the difference. The game didn't go out of its way to give me a name that could be easily converted into an insult. So I want to consider this from a positive side, something you could rename it to. Just call it Iron. Now you might say, why would I call it Iron? And I gave you an example, I primed you for it previously, because League of Legends players are familiar with Iron, right? League of Legends players know what Iron means. League of Legends players should expect that if they're not particularly good at RTS games and they come in, they play co-op versus AI, and they want the ranked experience, that they would be placed in a bottom league, and that bottom league would be Iron or Bronze, and they know what the Iron term means. Now you might ask, why do I care what these League of Legends people? You go about League of Legends, League of Legends, League of Legends. What are you got? Are you endorsed by Riot Games? Like, why do you care so much about League of Legends? Talk about Dota. The reason I mention League of Legends is that it is the most popular video game, at least since season 2, or it's been in the top 1 to 3, 1 to 5 at worst on Twitch for about a decade now, going on 15 years. Let's think about the relationship that League of Legends has to Stormgate, right? Both of them are being marketed as or seen as, listen, they might not like it, as the easier version to some other games that are inside of their sphere of influence, inside their genre, right? There's a similarity. League of Legends players are familiar with a top-down, slightly angled-back perspective in which you control a character by using left mouse button to select and right mouse button to right click to move somewhere. There is an attack command where you are encouraged to use your keyboard to A click as opposed to just right click and then right click your target. They are used to using their hands on home row keys to generate a series of advantages for the hero that they're controlling. In their case, QWER as opposed to ZXCV, but the finger position feels very similar, even if it's only one row off. A lot of the abilities of the co-op heroes, let's ignore the fact that there are co-op heroes, which is clearly in an effort to make that experience more palatable to people who like hero-style games like League of Legends. Something for you to think about, though. And then those heroes are outsized in their level of importance, right? And they follow the same like control structure, and it's a team game. And similar to how League of Legends has this top-down perspective with mouse and keyboard controls that feel very similar, just like that in co-op versus AI, there are deliberate wave patterns that encourage players to catch the wave, to follow the wave. Right? This is very similar to what happens with how you know what lanes you're supposed to go to in League of Legends. You might not know very much about it, but you know where to go, and you know that there are minions and the minions are gold. In this case, the enemy minions are actually enemies that you have to take care of or you have to deal with. And of course, it is cooperative. So you would do yourself an instant win win by essentially piggybacking on the knowledge that the League of Legends community has for what Iron is. Now, again, Iron might still be considered the worst rank, but at least it doesn't have people going around and telling you that you're ass.